All right. Well, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about the mid-season. We're about halfway through the season now. We kind of want to, get the top three teams from each conference who we think is really a championship contender. Obviously, different things can happen in the second half of the season. I always think about how when we a few years ago were talking about the Celtics and the first half was such a disaster.
Mhm.
We were talking about trading Jalen Brown or Jason Tatum, figuring out how to do this, and then they went to the finals after that. So but for now, I guess Jack, do you want to start off with your top three teams from the East?
Yeah, if I'm looking at my East right now, I mean, in my opinion, I think it is a clear, just based on record alone, I think that's a fairly accurate depiction of who I
Mhm.
anticipated being there. And that is looking like the Cavs, Celtics, Knicks, probably not in that order, to be honest with you. I think probably initially would have thought Celtics, Knicks, Cavs based on offseason moves prior and just obviously championship pedigree now that we have as Celtics fans. I think you look at the Knicks, they're still kind of trying to figure it out a little bit. They'd swung for two huge trades this offseason. They have obviously, I don't want to say trying to figure it out. They're 28 and 16 right now, right? So like they've kind of got it together for the most part. Spacing is a little bit weird, which I think we predicted, and like Mikal Bridges has been a weird fit, all things considered. But he's not a net negative by any means. I don't think. I don't. I just think from like all things considered, I don't think those lineups are really like doing what they Tibbs at least anticipated them doing. Um, so we'll see what happens there. I think Celtics being the number 2 seed is a little surprising, just based on like how many games we won and how well we performed last year, just like utter dominance basically. But there is some regression to the mean. Basically, dudes are getting a little bit older. Obviously, KP was out the first half of the year. Got to get our charisma back with him. We have to figure out how to work Pritchard in. Which I think we've started to do again now. We've had this kind of weird like 500 game stretch over the last 15 games. But we just routed a couple dudes the last couple games we played and then had like a really ugly loss to like Toronto. And I'm like, okay, what's kind of happening here? It's the Celtics play well against good teams and play bad against bad teams like that we have always known, unfortunately. But if that's any consolation prize, like we have done well in the years past, at least last year, I could say. So hopefully this is just kind of locking in. Even Steve Kerr said it after getting snubbed by Jalen and Jason. He's kind of like, this happens. Like this happened for the Warriors during our dynasty, right? Like this happens for championship teams, like really good quality teams. And you got the Cavs, right? And the Cavs have been a juggernaut from the get-go. 6 losses and 36 wins is just insane. Like I don't really have too much to say beyond that. Like that's we're probably like at the actual midway point of the season, like when it comes to games played. So like 42 games in and you have 6 losses. I don't care like what team you are. That's really impressive. They were a team that kind of had to figure out how to work in Mitchell last year. And they definitely did this year. Like he is able to take over and able to like distribute and like get it to other dudes. Darius Garland is playing a lot better. Like Evan Mobley's play like has taken a step. Like it's fun. They're a fun team to watch right now. They remind me honestly of like last year's Celtics. Like they have it kind of figured out and they are firing on all cylinders all the time.
Ryan, would you agree with those top three in the East?
Yeah, I think right now, like the Celtics, probably it's hard to even say upside because I just don't know with the Cavs. But I honestly would probably put the Cavs at 1 right now just because they've been so good. And right, the Celtics are kind of in that like season after a championship woes where it's like right, they kind of play with their food. They're not always there every night 100%, but you're ultimately not really worried about them. And then third, yeah, I don't think there's anyone that can quite touch the Knicks. Like I said, I don't think the Bucks. I just don't think the Bucks are there. The pace, honestly, I believe at the beginning of the season, I had Celtics, Knicks, and Pacers in that order.
Me too.
That was at the start of the season. However, like a couple really unpredictable things have happened in this first half. The Cavs, so I never would count them out. I wouldn't say that I'm shocked that they're really good, but I think I had them 6th or 7th because last year they struggled. No, they weren't all 4 players weren't playing together consistently. Jarrett Allen does limit you as in modern basketball, as the type of center he is in Mobley. I hadn't seen any indication, and I still don't think he's fully gotten to that point in shooting they would like him to at all. But it's they just worked it out this year, and they have like a lot of talent. Garland looked horrible last year after I was really high on him a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think it's tough to say with them, but I think like you look at this record, it is just like half of the season, but they've been amazing, and it just kind of, I think it speaks in itself. I think they're like, right, when I say a one, like I guess they're technically kind of a soft one, and yeah, the Celtics might overpower them in the playoffs. We'll have to see. But right now, I think it's those three. The other thing that kind of threw me off is the Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton was horrible to start the year, really struggling to the point where I really wasn't sure what to make of it. Right? Is this going to hurt him his entire career? Is it kind of done? He seems to have picked things up mostly. I don't think he looks quite as like good as he did, like, you know, when everyone was really high on him like the last couple of years, but he's getting there. So I think they're a fringe team. Honestly, I think like a top 6 is a more interesting debate because you've got some teams. You've got them, Orlando, or is Orlando, are they all coming back? What does that look like? The Hawks are kind of scrappy. I kind of wonder if they might be a team, if they might sneak in for a run again.
Yeah.
They were actually a team I was considering for Jimmy, but it would make no sense. It wouldn't do enough. But they are like an interesting team to me right now. For like, probably just because they beat us. But like, man, say what you want about Trae Young, but like at the end of a game, he does just turn into like fucking Jerry West. Like,
so good. So good.
I know when people are like, because that's another one when people are like, oh, Trae Young sucks. It's like, no, Trae Young is really good at basketball. He's one of the most talented players in the world. He's an incredible guard. He makes some very poor decisions, and he's hard to play with. But and he's not always consistent. But he's a great. I mean, he's so talented.
Yeah,
very talented player. And the Hawks have found a way to make him work. Make it work this year. It seems like Jalen Johnson is the first player I've seen him. I think his usage is like, he's not scoring like he was before. I don't know if it's changed in recent times, but last I looked, he's averaging like 23, 24 points a game. That is not much for Trae Young. So, right, he has a willing second that he's working alongside. And then they got like guys like Dyson Daniels that can don't really need the ball at all. And, but also offer some willing passing. So yeah, to me, they're just like an interesting team to kind of look as like just like a floater fringe team that could like win a series on a whim.
Yeah. What about top 3 teams in the West? Do you have those off the top of your head, Ryan?
Given they are healthy, I think the best team is OKC right now. Mm-hmm. Probably after that, I'm gonna go Denver. Just because of Jokic, I don't even know where they're ranked. I can then third. Oh, that's really tough. Third, I will probably go. I'm going to say Grizzlies right now, just because at the beginning of the season, what kind of scared me is like, right, Ja didn't really have his jump back. I thought at the beginning of the season, but you kind of forget it. It's not like certain players where it's like he still looks good even without the crazy athleticism, in the sense of he's a great point guard and decision maker, and he's very crafty. And I think we kind of forget about that sometimes. So now he's like back in full swing, right? Like I think he just had that back on TikTok and all that. You throw him in, that team was built pretty well around him. I think they can be pretty good. Even just having like, they make some weird, interesting like draft choices and stuff always to me. But like, even though he's a rookie, like having Zach Edey as like a super tall guy for certain matchups, just like off the bench, heavy offense. I think I kind of like, I'd probably say those 3 teams. And then a close 4th is the Rockets. I think the Rockets are really good, and we should definitely talk about them. They're just very young, and they've had no experience in the playoffs. And there's just a couple things. Like I think Shane, right? There's all these different talented big men. You're going to really target Şengün, I guess, and like, right? You've got Dylan. Jabari Smith seems still a little unsure of himself. Like he's still figuring out fully who he is. Right? They're still trying to figure out what Amen Thompson's role is. So like, how does that emerge in the playoffs? I just think they have more to figure out and they're younger, but I think honestly, I guess it's tough, but like how they're performing right now, I guess I probably put them above the Grizzlies, and I only put the Nuggets above the Grizzlies because of Jokic and just like just my faith in him, especially in the playoffs. Yeah, that's what I would say. OKC, it depends. Like, what is Chet? I think Chet is coming back, but like, you know, when he's there, that makes a huge difference for them. Definitely. I mean, actually, Isaiah Hartenstein's been really good.
Yes.
I mean, he's been a good player for a minute, but yeah, that's what I'd have. I'll say OKC, Denver. I'll go Houston, then Grizzlies. I think the Grizzlies are more viable as. No, I'll go Grizzlies then Houston. Sorry.
All right, Jack, how do you feel about that?
Ryan just last second changed to the exact order that I had, if I'm being honest, because that's what I was thinking. The same reason, and I'll start with the bottom and work my way up. Just Houston in general, I think they're a little bit too young and a little bit too inexperienced. I think, whereas Memphis kind of has a little bit more of, I guess, for lack of a better term, they kind of have that more of a dog mentality, and that's like you think about people who we didn't even talk about, right? Like when you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, you think John Morant, you think Zach Edey, to be honest. You think Jaren Jackson, right? I think
Desmond
we didn't even
Bane.
mention exactly. We didn't even mention Desmond Bane. Like Desmond Bane as like one of the third, tertiary, like fourth options on that team. Not even fourth, like offensively, he's probably your 2 option. But like you look at like as when you say like best players, Desmond Bane probably doesn't come up in the first 2, maybe even 3 players, and that's impressive because he's a good player. Desmond Bane is a really solid basketball player. So I'll stick him above the Rockets. I like the Rockets in the long term. I ironically between those 2 teams, like it is known that I hate Dylan Brooks. I think most of the NBA hates Dylan Brooks, but like he is one of the better players for that team when like in his role, I guess you could say. You know, like he comes in, he is like from a 3-and-D perspective, like he shoots it decently. He's not like terrible, frankly. I think just in general, he fits that role really well. So kudos to him. I can't stand him, but they're a fun team to watch, obviously.
That's the only thing I haven't with them. I haven't watched him enough this season to know what's his percentage in his shooting at, because that was in Memphis. I mean, he was just shooting at a really high clip. There were just like crazy ones. Like I think it was like 2 seasons ago. He shot more threes than like James Harden, Luka Doncic.
Yeah,
there was a couple others, and he shot the lowest percentage, and the second lowest on the highest usage was also Fred VanVleet, I remember. But
yeah,
but I think that was just a bad year, and it was just a funny stat to match the 2 of them together. But yeah, that's the thing with Brooks, is just like I mean, I'm not going to take credit for this. I heard this somewhere. I think it was like a journalist on The Ringer posted on Twitter. It was like saying Dylan Brooks is Marcus Smart is Dylan Brooks if he went to therapy. It's pretty like, as Celtics fans, I think that's like super accurate.
It is,
and that kind of just tells you like Dylan Brooks issues are like Marcus Smart's amplified.
Yes,
and like I don't care what anyone says. I have never seen Marcus Smart really take it. I don't think he's a cheap shot guy at all. I think he played very tough, but and he was physical. But you know, Dylan Brooks does take cheap shots, and you know, he's been kicked out for it, but apparently that's why Ime Udoka and him are a good match.
It's similar to, you like cheap shots. Ime at least does, right? And I think if you look at like the efficiency for Brooks is up a little bit, and same with VanVleet. And I think, like you said, it was a bad year, Ryan. At the same time, like they actually pair with each other decently well, because they have dudes who, like, when it comes to high efficiency, you have Şengün, who is just like an absolute. He can do whatever he wants, like offensively in the paint. And I don't mean like bully ball necessarily. Like I mean like he just does weird shit and it works out all the time. It's like I don't want to say like the mini Jokic comparison because I feel like that's comparing like a god to like baby Hercules. You know, like you don't know what he is yet, but I think it's a fun concept to toy with, and that's why I like Houston. I think they're not
Yeah,
quite this for me though.
yeah, you got to see where Şengün goes. What does impress me, what kind of impressed me about Ime is I was kind of wondering, I was like, man, I hope he doesn't step away from Şengün. Like, right? Like, for some reason, I had that fear. I was like, I wonder if he's going to go in on these other guys and kind of like, because Şengün was at that time kind of becoming almost like no, they didn't really have an identity with even with like Kevin Porter Jr. and all of that. And it was like
Right.
pretty clear, like like Şengün is basically like I got this and was like starting to run the team a little bit on offense. And what is interesting is I think he actually they've upped like MA upped his usage, but I would say since then he's been doing a little less of like the kind of Jokic passing role, just a little, and he's been more hammering it in the paint, which is interesting. I think it's like, hey, if you're going to be this type of player, you first have to establish yourself as a definitive scoring threat. Because the way that we're going to open up your passing lanes is if everyone thinks they have to stop you scoring, or if that you're always a threat beneath the basket. So they've been working on that with him. But again, it's like kind of fleshing itself out. I think at the very least, he's looking like as an offensive scorer and facilitator, he could be more of a dominant factor than Sabonis, possibly.
I agree.
Is that fair? I don't know about Jokic. You can't really get there yet, but I think it's like, oh yeah, this guy can give Sabonis a run for his money. He's not as good on the boards, but there is that.
I agree with that entirely.
All right. Unless you guys have anything else. Here,
no.
All right, give it to the audience. Let us know your top 3, East and West. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for your time today. Jack, do you want to promote anything before we get on out of here?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, and that's at that's at JC Tiernan, or you can follow me on Twitter, both or X, whatever you want to call it. That's at Jack_Tiernan. I got myself all crossed up there. Follow me those places. I've got sports stuff going on all the time.
Awesome, Ryan. Same thing. Anything you want to plug?
No, not at this time.
All right. Well, thank you both so much, and we will see you all in the next one.